Breaking news from West Africa has ignited a global firestorm. Burkina Faso's parliament has passed a controversial new law criminalizing homosexuality with severe penalties. This isn't just a local issue, it's a profound debate about national sovereignty, cultural identity, and universal human rights, resonating from Ouagadougou to Washington. This decision forces us to confront complex questions about who defines morality in a rapidly changing world. It challenges policymakers, engages students, and demands critical thought from every global citizen. What does this law truly signify for Africa's future and the international order? Burkina Faso's new legislation, enacted in 2025, imposes harsh penalties for homosexual acts. Individuals found guilty face imprisonment ranging from 2 to 5 years, alongside substantial fines that can reach thousands of dollars. This marks a significant legal shift in a nation already grappling with numerous challenges. Supporters of the law articulate a clear defense. It safeguards deeply held African cultural and religious traditions. They view it as a vital measure to protect what they term the moral foundation of society, asserting national values against perceived external influences. For them, this is an act of cultural preservation. However, critics vehemently argue that this law represents a dangerous regression of human rights. They highlight that Burkina Faso is already struggling with insecurity, internal displacement, and widespread poverty. Human rights organizations warn that such legislation could exacerbate persecution, discrimination, and violence against LGBTQ+ individuals, creating a climate of fear. This legal move also raises concerns about public health initiatives, particularly in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Criminalization often drives vulnerable populations underground, making essential health services and prevention efforts far more difficult to implement effectively. The potential for social stigmatization and abuse under this law is a grave concern for many international observers. The timing of this legislative action is far from coincidental. It is deeply embedded in Burkina Faso's current political landscape. Across Africa, we are observing a discernible trend where governments are enacting stricter laws concerning homosexuality. Uganda, Ghana, and now Burkina Faso exemplify this growing movement. These laws frequently emerge during periods of significant political instability or nationalistic fervor. Leaders often leverage such issues to rally public support, emphasizing national identity, traditional values, and sovereignty. It becomes a powerful tool to consolidate power and divert attention from other pressing domestic problems. In Burkina Faso's specific context, the military-led government faces immense pressure. The nation is battling persistent jihadist insurgencies in its northern regions, contending with international sanctions, and actively striving to assert greater independence from lingering Western influence. This complex environment provides fertile ground for such legislation. By passing this law, the government strategically positions itself as a staunch defender of African values. It draws a clear line in the sand against what it perceives as Western cultural imposition, reinforcing a narrative of self-determination. This move is designed to resonate with a populace seeking strong leadership and a clear national direction amidst uncertainty. It is crucial to grasp the nuanced reality that in many African countries, homosexuality is not widely accepted. Religious doctrines, both from Christianity and Islam, exert profound influence on societal norms and individual beliefs. Traditional African beliefs often categorize same-sex relationships as unnatural or worse, as foreign imports. This deeply rooted perspective allows politicians to effectively mobilize public sentiment around the issue. For a significant portion of the African populace, rejecting homosexuality is perceived as a legitimate act of resistance against Western cultural domination. It becomes a symbol of reclaiming agency and identity. Many Africans view Western nations as attempting to impose liberal values, including LGBTQ+ rights, often as conditions for aid, trade, or diplomatic partnerships. This perception fuels resentment and a desire to push back. Laws like Burkina Faso's are, in this light, a defiant assertion. We will not be dictated to on how to govern our societies or define our morality. This stance also taps into a broader Pan-Africanist sentiment, advocating for African solutions to African problems. It challenges the notion of universal human rights as solely defined by Western frameworks, instead emphasizing cultural relativism and the right of nations to self-determination in matters of social policy. The debate is not merely about sexuality, it is about the very definition of modernity and tradition in a post-colonial world. In Washington, Brussels, and other Western capitals, the reaction to Burkina Faso's new law has been swift and largely condemnatory. Human rights organizations, the United Nations, and various Western governments have unequivocally denounced the decision. They argue that criminalizing homosexuality fundamentally violates basic human freedoms and could further isolate the country from international cooperation. The international community's toolkit for response typically includes sanctions, reductions in foreign aid, and diplomatic pressure. These measures are often deployed with the intention of compelling states to adhere to international human rights standards. However, the efficacy of such pressure tactics is a subject of ongoing debate, particularly in the current geopolitical climate. A critical question arises: will this external pressure achieve its intended effect, or might it inadvertently backfire, pushing Burkina Faso closer to new strategic allies? In today's increasingly multipolar world, nations like Burkina Faso have more options than ever before. They can turn to partners such as Russia, China, or other African states that prioritize non-interference in internal affairs over human rights conditionalities. This dynamic highlights a fundamental tension between the West's promotion of universal human rights and the principle of national sovereignty. The perceived hypocrisy of some Western nations, given their own historical records, further complicates their moral authority. This situation forces a re-evaluation of how international norms are established and enforced, and whether punitive measures truly foster long-term change or merely entrench resistance. This law transcends the borders of Burkina Faso. It is a microcosm of a much larger global struggle over fundamental values. On one side, the West largely champions universal human rights, individual freedoms, and the principle of inclusivity as cornerstones of modern society. These ideals are often presented as non-negotiable and applicable to all. On the other side, many African nations, alongside other developing countries, argue that cultural traditions and national sovereignty should take precedence over what they perceive as imported ideals. They contend that each society has the right to define its own moral compass and social norms, free from external coercion. This perspective emphasizes cultural diversity and self-determination. This situation represents a profound clash of civilizations, a tension between modern liberalism and traditional conservatism. The African continent, with its rich tapestry of cultures and complex colonial history, has become a significant battleground for these competing ideologies. Leaders across Africa are increasingly compelled to make difficult choices, either yield to international pressure and align with global liberal norms, or double down on local identity and traditional values, risking international isolation. The debate extends beyond LGBTQ+ rights to encompass broader questions about development models, governance, and the very definition of progress. It forces a critical examination of whose values are deemed universal and how power dynamics influence the global discourse on human rights. This struggle is shaping the future of international relations and the evolving global order. So, what are the long-term implications of such laws for Africa's future trajectory? On one hand, countries like Burkina Faso that enact these laws may face significant economic repercussions. They risk losing crucial foreign aid, seeing trade deals jeopardized, and deterring much-needed foreign investment. This could hinder development and exacerbate existing economic vulnerabilities. Conversely, these legislative actions could serve to strengthen domestic unity and foster a powerful sense of nationalist pride. By asserting cultural independence, governments might boost their legitimacy among a populace that feels their values are under attack. This could also push African nations to forge stronger alliances beyond traditional Western partners, seeking out new economic and political collaborations with countries that respect their sovereignty without imposing social conditionalities. The fundamental question that emerges is whether Africa will ultimately define its future on its own terms, charting a course that reflects its diverse cultures and aspirations. Or will it remain perpetually caught between competing global powers, each relentlessly pushing their own distinct agendas and value systems? This dilemma underscores the continent's ongoing quest for true self-determination in a complex, interconnected world. The choices made today by nations like Burkina Faso will undoubtedly shape the continent's geopolitical standing, its economic development, and its social fabric for generations to come. It is a pivotal moment that demands careful consideration of both immediate consequences and long-term strategic implications. Burkina Faso's new law on homosexuality has undeniably ignited a fierce controversy, but the deeper narrative is far more profound. It is a story about national sovereignty, the preservation of cultural identity, and the fundamental question of who holds the authority to define morality in our modern, interconnected world. Is this legislative move a regrettable step backward for universal human rights, or is it a bold stride forward for African independence and self-determination? This issue compels us to engage in critical thought and open dialogue. Should sovereign nations possess the unassailable right to defend their cherished traditions, even when those traditions clash with evolving global values and human rights norms? Or should the principle of universal human rights always take precedence, guiding the actions of all nations regardless of cultural context? We invite you to share your perspectives on this complex and vital debate. What are your thoughts on the balance between national sovereignty and universal human rights? Let us know your insights in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your networks, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analyses of politics, power, and policy that shape our world.